Continuing my reviews of the Best Picture Oscar nominees, we are going to move on to the review of Dunkirk, directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Fionn Whitehead, Mark Rylance, and Tom Hardy, among many others. In the early days of World War II, 400,000 British and French soldiers were trapped in the French port town of Dunkirk. The film Dunkirk tells the story of their evacuation attempt, and this evacuation attempt is seen from three different points of view. On land, we see this through the eyes of a young British soldier who is trapped at Dunkirk. At sea, we see this through the eyes of a group of civilians on their boat who are participating in the evacuation. And in the air, we see this through the point of view of two RAF fighter pilots. And all of this combines into a very gripping and very harrowing experience that is about a very particular and important point in the history of World War II. Those of you who have watched my previous reviews will know that I usually start by talking about the performances, and all of the performances in the film are very good. Not just by the more established actors like Tom Hardy and Mark Rylance, but also by the more unknown actors and the ones who haven't really acted very much before. What really surprised me was that Harry Styles was not only in this film, because I did not know that before I saw it, but he was actually very good in his role. When asked why he cast Harry Styles in a role in the film, Christopher Nolan told an interviewer that he had a casting call of thousands of young men for the roles of the soldiers, and he basically just had it. And really, you can see in the film that he did. Now, while the performances in the film are very good, the acting isn't really the main focus of the film, because this film is not in any way character-driven. This is a very different kind of film. It does not focus on the characters. Yes, you see what the characters are doing and what they're going through, but you never figure out any personal information about them. You never find out their backstory. This film is not about the characters. Rather, this film is solely about the event that takes place. Now, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I am a huge Christopher Nolan fan. I loved Interstellar, I loved Inception, I've pretty much loved every single film I've seen from him. Christopher Nolan has a very particular style of filmmaking. He does not make films that are dumbed down. He makes films that require you to think. And Dunkirk is no different in that regard. It's a film that requires you to pay attention to it in order to really get what's going on. Nolan has said that this is probably his most experimental film, and the main reason why is, like in films he's done beforehand, he plays around with the concept of time. As I mentioned in the plot description, the film is split into three different segments: from land, from sea, and from air. And what a lot of people don't realize going into the film is that these three different segments are taking place in different points in time that mesh together as the film goes along. The parts involving the soldiers trapped on the beach, the land segment, take place over the course of a week. The parts with the civilians on their boat going to participate in the evacuation take place over the course of one day. And the segments in the air involving the fighter pilots take place during the course of 1 hour. And this is put together seamlessly through great filmmaking. This is probably technically one of the better war films I've seen in my lifetime. Dunkirk is yet another film that proves that Christopher Nolan is a genius in terms of how to construct a film. He knows how to put things together in a story to make it work seamlessly, even if they're not taking place in a totally linear time frame. The way the film is edited together makes this totally seamless. And once again, we have an absolutely amazing score by Hans Zimmer that underscores the time aspect of the movie. And I'm not just talking about the ticking clock and the soundtrack. I'm talking about how the music ebbs and flows in order to lead into certain scenes. It's genius. And moving a little bit further away from the time aspect of the movie, the war element of the film is very good as well. The event that this film is portraying is truly a horrifying event. And the way Nolan portrays this in the film is fantastically put together through great cinematography, once again, great sound design. A funny thing about that is that I read on the trivia page for the film that there were some people who survived the Dunkirk invasion and evacuation. And these survivors who are still alive today ended up going to see a screening of the film that Nolan put together just for them. And when he asked them about it, they actually told him that the movie was a little bit louder than how it actually was on the beach. What I would say about this film is that it is another technical masterpiece by Christopher Nolan. It is very short on character development, but it's supposed to be short on character development. Again, this is not a film that's supposed to be about people in an event. It's supposed to be about the event itself. In this film, you're not supposed to get to know people. You're not supposed to know their backstories. You're not supposed to know a lot about them or where they came from. You are just supposed to know they're in this situation. What are they going to do? You as a viewer are thrown into this absolutely hellish situation, and you are racing against time to end up getting out of it. The clock is literally ticking, and I mean literally, really, because there's a ticking clock in the soundtrack. As I just mentioned, Christopher Nolan said that this film was probably his most experimental film to date. And in terms of portraying an event in such a way, his experiment worked. This is a very good movie, and it's a technical masterpiece, and it really does a good job of making this impending feeling of dread about how this event is going to go down. While this film I definitely do not think is going to go down in history as the best war film ever made in terms of characters, this film is going to be one of the top films in history as a depiction of war as an event. And because of that, I definitely recommend seeing it. Alright guys, that's it for my review of Dunkirk, and we have one more film to review for the Oscar nominee list, which is Get Out, and that film review is coming up next. Have a good night, everybody.